All right. All right. We'll get started in just a moment. Thanks for being here, guys. Feel free. Oh, I see we have a few people from Toronto, Calgary, and a few US cities, so looks like a good mix of people. We'll get started in just 1 to 2 minutes here while we're waiting for a few more to join onto the link. All right, let's get started. So, uh, welcome everyone. Thanks for jumping onto the webinar. Really glad that you're here. Just for quick expectations for today's webinar is this isn't a Denver pitch at all. What we're going to be talking about today is a conversation about what Canadian AI teams are actually building and why the infrastructure question matters more than most people realize around it. We're going to be covering real use cases for agriculture, cybersecurity, public sector, and research and academia. The sovereignty issue, and what it means, why it's urgent, and why it matters, whether you're Canadian, American, or from any other country. And questions are welcome at the end. So feel free to drop them into the Q&A section as we go, and we'll check them out at the end and can answer them there. All right. So most teams hit the same three walls. Before we get into the stories, I want to name something that we hear constantly. Three barriers show up across every sector and every team size. So the first wall is getting started takes forever. Whether it's finding a GPU provider, hyperscaler queues, trying to find the right compute, or complex onboarding, teams usually lose weeks, sometimes months, before even getting a GPU started. For startups, especially, this can kill their programs, and for research, it really hinders what they're working on. Um, for the second wall, performance isn't predictable. The different GPU usage can throttle others in certain environments. Shared infrastructure means a co-tenant's workload can steal your GPU headroom mid-run. So for real-time AI, think security monitoring or autonomous systems, a latency spike isn't just annoying, it can actually cause an entire failure for what they're working on. And for wall number three, data leaves the country the moment you deploy. So most clouds the default routes that they follow go through foreign jurisdictions for where the data is processing, even if the data center is inside of Canada. For a lot of Canadian organizations, that's government, health, research, whatever it may be, it's not a preference for them. This could be a hard stop regulatory wise. And this is the one that we're going to be digging into more so today because I think it's the most misunderstood and it's where the conversations are really shaping around right now. So these three walls are connected, and the teams we're going to be talking about hit all three and got past all three. Okay. So today's agenda with the three pillars, we have three stories. So the first pillar is speed to results. We have a real customer story for each one of these. The first one being an agri-tech company doing something remarkable in the autonomous drone section. The second is predictable performance, where we're going to be highlighting a cybersecurity company. And the third is your data, your model, your jurisdiction. So this is where research institutions and the city of Calgary are doing some really interesting stuff, and why it matters to them that the data stays inside of this jurisdiction. It's worth saying up front that these three aren't competing priorities, but the teams will look at got all three. So we'll come back to that. Okay, for Denvr, I won't go into this too far in depth, but I want to give you guys an overview of a bit about Denvr if you haven't heard it already. We were founded in 2017 in Calgary, Alberta, in Canada. We're Canada's leading AI neocloud. So we help startups, enterprise, research institutions, and academia and all over. What makes us different is we're completely vertically integrated. So we own the hardware, we own the data center, and we own the software stack. So that's what helps us offer dedicated sovereign high performance compute. The only two inputs we don't control are power and fiber. But I'll keep it brief because you're here for the rest of the presentation. You're not here for just the company overview. A little bit more about Denvr in the specifics, though, is the zero water usage and that we're entirely built around AI. And just to quickly go into detail on that, is that we immerse all of our GPUs and we've had zero fluid related failures in the last 3 years. This isn't just a pilot setup, it's actual production grade continuous operation. We're able to provide or to use 40% less power for the same GPU output. So with a PUE of less than 1.04 and the global average being 1.58, that means we're dramatically more efficient. And zero water use helps us scale up to compete against some of the leading hyperscale GPU providers from a Canadian team. And for AI teams, this translates the efficiency for compute per dollar. We currently have 2,000 GPUs available, and we have 2,500 plus GPUs roadmapped for Canada in the next 12 to 18 months. So let's get into the stories. We've got speed to results as the first section here. So this is the first pillar, the fastest path from an idea to a running workload without infrastructure complexity eating your runway. So the first example is an agri-tech company. This is really exciting. This story uses autonomous drones with edge AI. This is one of the most technically impressive things happening in Canadian AI right now. What the system does, an autonomous drone flies over crops at a high speed, and the computer vision identifies individual weeds at a plant level mid-flight. The drone triggers a spray response only where weeds are present, and all inference runs on the drone itself. So it's fully autonomous in the field. But why it's impressive is it moves so fast, it's between 30 and 50 miles an hour, and it's able to differentiate weeds from crops at an early sprout stage. So this is a massive cost savings per acre, per growing season. And this was built here in Canada. So the sovereign AI side of this is that it's a Canadian company building Canadian agricultural data, solving a Canadian problem. So the crop recognition models and training data and the decision logic, it's all Canadian IP. So as this scales up, they're growing their roots, so to speak, in Canada. Their approach is grounded in the idea that Canadian innovation is built on Canadian data and should stay under control within Canada. And that sovereign AI mindset, it's more than just a compliance checkbox. For them, it's part of their values. And they don't just serve the Canadian market, they serve internationally. But their entire value structure is that they're growing within this ecosystem. Next up, we have predictable performance. So this is pillar number two. Uh, it's what you provision is what you get every time. There's no noisy neighbors or different centers that the compute will be coming from randomly, and we'll be diving into the story with IntegraTrace. So IntegraTrace is a cybersecurity startup out of Toronto, and they're building something really fascinating. The problem they're solving is that most organizations have no idea what's actually happening inside of their cloud environments in real time. So they've built an AI-powered cloud identity access management platform. So they're able to see users that access their information over time. And they do this for enterprise as well as small, medium businesses across the board. They continuously analyze who's accessing what, and they have algorithms to detect behavior that's out of the ordinary. So anything that's, over provisioned, permissions given to users accidentally, they have real-time AI scans through employee systems to check these problems out ahead of time. You could tell that they have a lot of risk associated with the data, and they need to be careful with it as they go. So why this matters is most breaches don't come from exotic attacks. They come from permissions that were never cleaned up, accounts that shouldn't exist anymore, or something, some access someone has slightly outside of the normal pattern. That AI catches that signal noise, and they're very proactive about the way they go about it. The sovereignty part of this is that they have to think about what platform it's all trained on. Real world attack patterns, customer access logs, this is all company information, company data. That's some of the most sensitive proprietary intelligence a company can build. And a cybersecurity company whose AI model IP sits on foreign jurisdiction infrastructure has a real tension at the heart of their product. So their whole value proposition is protecting access and data, and their credibility depends on knowing exactly who can compel access to their systems. So for them, keeping their data sovereign and keeping their customers' data sovereign is the number one priority, and it's actually how they grow as people are changing and understanding how this all impacts them. For the next section, we have your data, your model, your jurisdiction. So this is the third pillar, and this is the one that I'd like to spend the most time on, because this is the conversation happening in every boardroom, every government, every research institution right now. It's not just Canada, and I'll stress that a bit again later, because I think this is a conversation that's happening in every country across the world. Is why does it matter where the data is? And how does that impact it as well? Like who owns it? It's the most misunderstood pillar. So, first up, I'd like to tell you guys a little bit about the Cloud Act as an example of why data sovereignty really matters. A lot of you may already have heard about this. I've had a lot of conversations, especially in the AI community, about this because people just ask me about it. The US Cloud Act was passed in 2018. And what it does is if you are a US incorporated company, a US court can compel you to hand over that data in your possession, custody, or control, regardless of where the data physically is stored. So this means that, big hyperscale companies, for example, like AWS can have a data center in Canada. And if the parent company is US incorporated, then the data is reachable under US legal process. And this actually happened in last year, June of last year in France, where Microsoft's director of public and legal affairs said before the French Senate when he was asked, can you guarantee that the French government data stored in the France data center from Microsoft won't be transmitted to the US authorities? He responded, no, he could not guarantee it. And so that's not like a hypothetical situation. This is an example of it happening. And that director agreed that the US officials can take their government data under oath. But I want to be clear, like this is a big thing that's happening where it does take a U.S. court order. They're not regularly sharing it with other companies, but it does provide more room for the conversation of, where are we at with storing our data, and could it be vulnerable to a potential off switch or someone else accessing it? Uh, why this matters, specifically for public sector research and enterprise. For public sector, Canada's own Treasury Board's white paper has said that as long as a cloud service provider is subject to the laws of a foreign country, Canada will not have full sovereignty over its data. So this is public sector really shifting, and I think this is countries all over saying they need to own their own data. And this was a big misconception over the years that we thought if it was stored here, that it was ours. For research, health data, indigenous data, federally funded IP, ethics boards require jurisdictional clarity before research can even begin. So there's a lot more discussion happening, and a lot of priorities are shifting for that as well. And for enterprise, the Cloud Act really impacts things like financial services, the health data, and energy. Data governance is not optional in those industries. So again, a note for the US friends on the call. This is not like a Canada versus the United States. This is just a highlight of it's a universal issue. Every country needs to start looking into this. And even the European Commission launched a 180 million euro sovereign cloud tender in the fall of last year. 63% of global boards rank data sovereignty as a top five risk at the end of last year. And every democracy is coming to the same conclusion that data stored here is not the same as data governed here. Um, So the second part of this, of what I was really trying to get to as well, is that Canadian research institutions are actually, putting money towards this stuff moving forward. So Canada has committed $2 billion towards sovereign AI compute strategies and all different facets. And what this is really interesting is towards is that 2 billion is towards AI as a whole. So the sum of that is towards AI supercomputing and infrastructure, but the other part is funding this type of research. So we have wildfire AI, where Canada has burned approximately 15 million hectares in 2023. That's a national record. BC alone spends about $817 million in fire suppression costs in a single season. So there's a lot of costs being carried in the wildfire area, and they're using AI to go through satellite imaging and weather predicting models to try to predict exactly where these fires are going to be more likely to start and do preventative maintenance or start putting resources there ahead of time. We have autonomous water treatment, where they're doing reinforcement learning to rural water drinking systems for chlorination, filtration, all that stuff. We have AI in emergency rooms, where there's even, we've talked about it in the past, but there's an AI scribe being piloted in Canadian hospitals, where there's Jenkins that came out of the University of Alberta with Dr. Ross Mitchell. That's in 81 emergency departments now, which is pretty massive. And health data is the most sensitive category of personal information in Canadian law. So running AI that requires that data, knowing exactly where, requires to know exactly where it is and who can get access to it. The pattern here is that every one of these programs involves data that's sensitive or governed by different indigenous data sovereignty principles. Every one of them needs to know before they start that their compute is jurisdictionally protected. And when it's not solved, this research can take additional months until they figure out, the ins and outs of it. All right. Now for city teams, we work with the city of Calgary and to support their Wave Tech Center. The Wave Tech Center is the city of Calgary's dedicated technology innovation center, launched in October 2024. And it's a provide a secure off-network environment for the city teams to prototype AI or automation before running full deployment. This runs on Canadian-owned infrastructure through a dark fiber network deployed at our city facility, at our own data center facility. That's a deliberate choice and not a default. Some of the things that they're working on are really interesting. This is the City of Calgary working on AI pavement distress detection. They're working on crowd counting at major events. They're working on generative AI chatbots, robotic and agentic bots across 15 city business units, doing procurement forecasting, document processing, like all this expense categorization, all this very, tedious and difficult and detail-oriented work. This is the stuff that they're testing on here. They're building YYC Robot, which explores autonomous systems that can support city operations, and VR building inspections, which is really interesting to do simulations for inspecting structures safely. The sovereignty dimension for the city, um, Calgary manages data for 1.4 million citizens. Public safety, permitting, traffic, utilities, social services, that data cannot enter a foreign jurisdiction, not as a preference, as a legal obligation to the public. The city's published AI values are beneficial, accountable, transparent, ethical, fair, privacy and security first, and reliable. That privacy and security first value is what makes jurisdiction a non-negotiable. The second challenge that municipalities face is most AI pilots fail to scale because the transition to production requires complete re-architecture. Teams build something that works at a pilot level, but then discover that scaling up means rebuilding from scratch, and it kills innovation programs and wastes resources. So the infrastructure question of where do you build your first experiment is a decision with a lot of long-term consequences. So it's very important to get started, on our own. sovereignty. What every team had in common that got past all of this is they started before they had all the answers. So they didn't wait until they had a perfect infrastructure plan. I'm not saying that everybody needs to stop everything just to think about the infrastructure first, um, but they needed a platform where they could meet. They could be met where they are and kind of figure it out from there. So whether it's on demand or a low commitment start, they really needed something where they could try it out first, and then the results came after that. The infrastructure decision was the unlock, though, in every case. The right compute choice was removed a blocker that wasn't primarily technical. So it was cost predictability, it was compliance, it was reliability, and once that was solved, the AI work accelerated without, any other issues. And they've all got all three pillars. They have speed to results, predictable performance, but the most important part is that it's their data, their model, and it's under their own jurisdiction. They're not competing priorities at all. That last point is really worth sitting on. And the Canadian AI space entirely does not have to choose between moving fast and staying sovereign. The organizations that figure this out now won't need to re-architect in 3 years when the regulatory environments tighten up and everybody in the boardroom starts making decisions about, how compliance should be done. These teams are addressing it now, and they're already proving it. All right. So next up is Upper Bound. To any of those attending, we'd like to invite you to come find us. We have a presentation on May 21st at 12:30 on the E-Structure stage. We'll have Denvr shirts to give out. So these are an example of some of our shirts. That is not me. That's an AI generated person, and just repping the Denvr shirt. But it's kind of a cool, uh, you know, uh, making a statement about how we're not air cooled. We do something different with the immersion. But yeah, if you're at Upper Bound, please come meet with us. We'll be there the whole week. But that's during our presentation is May 21st at 12:30. So thanks everyone for joining. I really appreciate you spending this time with us. A few things I hope you walk away with is that, this is impressive AI happening in Canada right now, and these are real use cases that are being developed. Whether it's agriculture, cities, hospitals, research labs, it's all happening, rapidly, and the conversations are progressing. The infrastructure question isn't just technical. This is a legal, economic, and strategic conversation that's taking place. And sovereignty isn't just a Canadian only issue. This is something that's happening across the board. I've talked to groups in the UK, in the Netherlands, Germany, Southern America. There's a lot of different countries that are taking data sovereignty seriously, and this is just a direction that every country is heading. So please drop your questions in the chat. I think we have quite a bit of extra time here since we booked it for the hour, but this was only about 23 minutes. So yeah, drop your questions and I can take it from there. I'm trying to see the questions. Sorry, thanks for asking them. I just 1 moment.
It looks like we have a couple of questions here that came in.
Perfect. Okay, I see them here now. Thank you, Grace.
Okay,
My
great.
apologies.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay. Perfect. Let's address the first one that came in. We're a Canadian company. Here, I'll answer this live. So we're a Canadian company, but our team uses US-based SaaS tools daily. Does that make us exposed under the Cloud Act? Um, Short answer is yes, but it is a little bit nuanced. It's worth highlighting the risks. Like The entire goal of using these tools is to improve efficiency and not to necessarily put all of your, data or anything at risk on these tools. So it doesn't automatically mean you're in trouble. It just means that the data is subject to US jurisdiction on some of those tools. The Cloud Act is for any US incorporated company. So if it's a CRM or email platform or something like that, a US court can compel that company to produce your data, but that doesn't necessarily mean they will. And the risk isn't so great if it's not files that are that critical. The risk isn't that someone is browsing through your files. It will be like obviously a big court order to access it, but the question is what kind of data is flowing through those tools. So if it's for an internal project notes or marketing emails, risk is extremely low. I don't think it's going to be an issue at all. If it's like health records, citizen data, or financial data, that's where it does get a little bit tricky, and it does get serious. A useful way to think about stuff like that is um, do a quick audit of your stack and see what you use each tool for and what data lives on it. So it doesn't matter if anyone does have foreign access to it, if it's something that's regulatorily compliant with a certain industry or a law. Overall, most Canadian companies are using US tools for things that don't really matter if they're accessed. The goal is to make sure that the things that do matter aren't in that category. Then I see we have another question here. Um, Here we go. For a team that's early stage, where do you begin with sovereign AI? Is there a first step you'd recommend? Yeah, for early stage, I mean, with us specifically, we have an Ascend program. So that's a startup program similar to other startup programs where you can come try us out, get some credits to start, and then each month we give more credits based on the usage. That's a really good way to try us out, as it can be a very, very easy way to access a cloud tool from Canada, that's old GPUs located here, owned here, and help you scale up. For any other jurisdiction that you're an early stage startup in, I'd recommend doing some research, seeing where to build, seeing what programs are available to you, and make use of them. Make use of any startup program you can, start there, and try to find one early on that you can scale up on. Don't try to just use everybody's startup program. I would recommend, place your roots in one that you really like, and check out that it's fully sovereign owned as well as sovereign operated, and then scale up from there. I think that's probably the best way to get started. Those were the questions that I had. If anyone else has any questions, I don't see them yet. Feel free to reach out after. You could reach me at tom@denvr.com or just ping me on LinkedIn or anything after the call. We'll be at Upper Bound again, so definitely reach out to us there and let's connect. But thanks again, everybody, to joining onto this webinar. Really appreciate you taking the time to discuss these type of things and see what's happening in the country on a sovereign level. So yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and let's connect afterwards. Thank you.